My manager gave me the best verbal review of my career in December. 6 weeks later, I was on a performance improvement plan. No prior warning, no written documentation, nothing. The only thing that changed between December and January was that I had started asking about the promotion he had promised me. Then I did something that destroyed his career. The lawyer pulled up a screen I had never seen before. My manager's name was at the top. There were 31 entries. The first one was dated 8 months ago, and every single one of them was about me. My name is Ryan. For 2 years and 4 months, I worked as a senior account coordinator at a logistics company in Columbus. I won't name the company. What I will tell you is that for most of those 2 years, I believed I was doing well, not just tolerably well. Well, my manager's name was Keith. Every quarter, Keith sat across from me in a glass-walled conference room and told me I was one of the strongest people on his team. He used specific language. He said my client communication was exceptionally professional. He said my project turnaround times were consistently above standard. He said I had real leadership potential. I have notes from every one of those meetings. On December 14th, he said it again. On February 3rd, I was handed a performance improvement plan. There was no warning meeting, no written feedback, no documented concern, nothing I could find in any email, any performance file, any system I had access to. Just a document, 12 pages, citing specific incidents I had no memory of, using language I had never heard in any conversation with Keith. Listing dates, times, client names, and outcomes, all framed as failures. None of it matched anything I had experienced. I asked Keith directly. He was calm. He said the concerns had been building for a while. He said he had hoped things would improve on their own. He said the PIP was a chance for me to course correct before things went further. He said all of this without making eye contact. I went home that evening and started reading through everything I had. Every email, every client response, every internal message thread going back 2 years. What I found and what I didn't find is what broke the whole thing open. There was one detail in the PIP document that I almost skipped past. A small thing. I'm coming back to it because it's the detail that told me exactly where to look. Everything Keith had cited in the PIP was internally logged, not in email, not in written communications I'd received. In incident reports, a specific field inside the HR management system that managers could access and employees could not. That's not unusual on its own. Most companies have internal-only HR logging. What was unusual was this. The PIP cited 11 specific incidents over the previous 8 months. Dates, descriptions, outcomes, all logged by Keith. None of them had ever been raised with me, not in a one-on-one, not in an email, not verbally. But here is the detail I almost skipped past. One of the cited incidents, logged in October, framed as a missed client deadline with material impact, was on a project I had been explicitly pulled from in September. A project reassigned to another team member because Keith had told me in writing that my capacity was needed elsewhere. I still had the email. I went through all 11, one by one. 3 of them I could find no corresponding record of anywhere. No client complaint, no internal flag, no email chain that supported what the log described. They were dates and descriptions floating in the HR system with nothing underneath them. 4 of them were real events, but described in a way that inverted what had actually happened. One log entry described a client escalation I had resolved ahead of schedule as an unresolved client complaint requiring senior intervention. The client had sent a thank you email 2 days after I closed the issue. I had that email. 3 more were partial incidents, real situations, stripped of the context that explained why they had gone the way they had, including the instructions I had received from Keith himself. And one, the October deadline entry, was simply fabricated. A project I wasn't on, a deadline that wasn't mine, 11 entries, 0 that held up cleanly. The first entry in the system was dated June 9th. I need you to hold that date. Because when I tell you what happened in May, the June 9th entry stops looking like coincidence entirely. In May, 5 weeks before the first log entry, I had asked Keith about the senior coordinator promotion he had mentioned in my March review. He had told me in March verbally that I was on track for a senior role opening in Q3. He had been specific about it. He had named the timeline. He had said, and I wrote this down the same day, "I'm going to go to bat for you on this one, Ryan." In May, I followed up politely. In writing, Keith responded the same day. He said the role had been internally restructured and the timeline was no longer confirmed. He said he'd keep me updated. June 9th, first incident log entry. I went back and looked at every subsequent entry chronologically. The logs tracked a pattern I hadn't seen when I was living inside it. Every entry followed either a moment where I had communicated directly with someone above Keith, or a moment where I had asked a question about my own progression. An entry in July followed a skip-level meeting I had attended with Keith's director, a standard quarterly catch-up, nothing unusual. An entry in September followed an email I had sent asking about my end-of-year review timeline. The logs weren't a record of my performance declining. They were a record of Keith feeling watched, and I was 31 entries deep into a system I had never known existed. What happened when I brought all of this to an employment lawyer? I'm almost there. And the part I didn't expect is the part that matters most. I had the lawyer, her name was Denise, within the week. I brought everything. The PIP, my own email records, the October project reassignment email, the client thank you, the March review notes with the promotion language, the May follow-up email and Keith's response. A timeline I had built entry by entry, showing the pattern between my communications and the log dates. Denise read through it the same afternoon. She called me the next morning. She said, "The log entries alone aren't the case. The pattern of when they were created is." She filed an employment claim citing systematic fabrication of performance records, bad faith PIP initiation, and interference with a legitimate promotion process. She requested full disclosure of the HR system logs, not just the ones Keith had entered about me, but the entry history for the rest of his direct reports going back 2 years. What came back in discovery changed the shape of the case. 2 other employees, both of whom had left the company in the previous 18 months, both of whom had been placed on PIPs, both of whom had left with no severance and references that described performance concerns, had logs that followed the same pattern, same structure, same language. Different names. Keith had done this before. The company settled in mediation. The terms are confidential. What I'll say is this: the settlement was substantial. Keith is no longer at the company. A review of HR logging practices was initiated as part of the resolution. And both former employees, the ones who had left with damaged references, were contacted as part of the process. I don't know what they received. That's not my information to share. What I know is this: I almost didn't fight it. In the first week after the PIP, I genuinely considered just resigning, taking the hit to my record, moving on, finding somewhere else and starting over. Because fighting felt like a lot, and because a part of me, even knowing the reviews had been good, started to wonder if I had missed something. If maybe there was something real in those entries that I couldn't see clearly because I was too close to it. That is what a fabricated paper trail is designed to do. It doesn't just protect the person who built it. It makes you doubt yourself enough to walk away quietly. I almost did. The thing that stopped me was the October entry, the project I wasn't on. The deadline that wasn't mine, because that one, unlike the ones that were distorted or stripped of context, that one had no version of reality that matched. There was nothing to doubt. It simply hadn't happened. And once I knew one entry was invented, I knew I had to look at all of them. 31 entries, 8 months, a system I couldn't see, and one email from September that proved I wasn't on the project. That email was the whole case. If this story stayed with you, a like genuinely helps it reach more people who need to hear it. Share it with someone who has ever been handed a document and told it reflected things they never did. And subscribe if you're not here yet. I share stories like this every single week. One question before you go. Have you ever been evaluated on something you were never told was a problem, formally, in writing, by someone who had been watching you without saying a word? Tell me in the comments, because I don't think Ryan's situation is as rare as it should be.